조선노동당 총비서이신 경애하는 김종은 동지께서 회의에 참석하셨습니다. 사회하셨습니다. 정치국은 먼저 개일주의 정치와 일심 단결된 우리민의 힘은 이번 방역대전에서 승리할 수 있는 가장 유력한 담보라고 하시면서 모든 당 조직들과 정권기관들이 인민들의 생명을 소집할 때 대한 조선노동당 중앙위원회 정치국 결정서가 전원 찬성으로 채택됐습니다. 경애하는 총비서동지께서는 전체 인민들과 인민군 장병들이 신심을 굳게 하고 위대한 힘을 배가하여 조선노동당 중앙위원회 정치국은 당중앙군사위원 달하도록 했습니다.
If you've been following this channel for a while, you may know the story of Tuval, the man who broke Spyro in half. A prolific speedrunner and glitch hunter who was able to find all of the original Spyro games' major sequence breaks and set incredible world records. You wouldn't think an insane accomplishment like this could be replicated, but it turns out that a similar story took place in the earlier days of a different Insomniac title. This is the story of the most important Ratchet & Clank speedrunner of all time. A mysterious character whose influence was so great, they changed the way an entire game was being played. Let's dive in. To begin our story, we need to go back to where many speedrun stories begin, the start of the Twitch era, 2012 to 2014. At this point, the PlayStation speedrunning community was very small, maybe 50 to 100 people or so. So you can imagine the Ratchet community was only a small branch off of that. The majority of this community had their focus on routing and optimizing the first game in the series, which left the sequels largely untapped for potential. Ratchet & Clank 3 Up Your Arsenal, or Ouya for short, is one of the series' fan favorites, and would see some activity in the early years. There was a 2005 SDA 80% run by Cannibal K9, which was kinda just a one and done, a handful of glitch videos on YouTube here and there, but not much to speak of. In 2013 though, two runners were here to stay, and you may have heard of them. Zem and Insomniac Nintendo. Zem was the first person to pick up the pieces from where Cannibal K9 left off in 2005, improving on the oh so outdated 222.38 to 152.38, a straight half-hour improvement in January 2013. He would continue to lower the time with 149.29, 144.17, and 139.37. Ian would join the fray in September of 2013 and improve on Zem's time with 138 flat and 133.33, where the record would sit for a long time. As the community was approaching 2014, Ratchet & Clank 1 New Game Plus was starting to be seen as the main category of the entire Ratchet series. The run started from a file that already had all of the game's weapons and enough bolts to beat the game, which meant that the focus was more on the movement and tricks. Starting with items like the PDA gave runners an infinite jump, which was used from time to time and was a really cool discovery. Bottom line, Rack 1 NG Plus was the hottest shit on the market. It was experiencing a golden age where new things
has destroyed an inhibitor. Your team has destroyed an inhibitor. Your turret has been destroyed. Your team has destroyed a turret. Your team has destroyed a turret.
In League of
Legends, you control a champion, a powerful and heroic individual. Each champion has unique and powerful abilities that set them apart from other champions. No two champions are alike. You have slain an enemy. Minions have spawned.
My blade is yours.
Clear a path to an enemy turret and destroy it. The object of League of Legends is to pierce the enemy's defenses and destroy the Nexus located in the heart of their base. You should wait for more of your minions to arrive before advancing. An enemy has been slain. Your team has destroyed the turret. Your team has destroyed an inhibitor. Amazing. Turrets will come to the defense of friendly champions who are under attack.
Things were being discovered constantly, and everyone was loving it. But this raised a good question. Could Up Your Arsenal have an NG Plus category? That's just as dope. Starting with all the weapons leveled up sounds cool, and we begin the game with the charge boots, which is a huge speed upgrade, making the start of the run much faster in the world, and just to be the first to get a time on the leaderboards. You're gonna have to excuse the bitrate on this run, we're dealing with some vintage gamer footage. It's pretty old. Anyway, throughout the run, the main movement he was utilizing were thruster pack long jumps for smaller gaps, and the charge boots for longer stretches. When you double tap R1, you charge forward at full speed, but if you let go, you'll come to a screeching halt. If you keep holding R1, Ratchet will continue forwards, but the charge boot speed will slow down. This means that the best strategy is just to spam R1 to restart the charge every time you start to slow down, maintaining the full speed. You can also cancel the boots at any time by firing your weapon. so you don't have to worry about playing the entire charge boot animation out. IN's approach was more or less just any percent with the charge boots, and better weapons for the bosses. Even so, the time save was immediately obvious. The movement and weapons were a huge bonus, and New Game Plus playthroughs allow you to skip playing through the 5 Quark vidcomics. IN would achieve 109.17 in NG Plus in December 2013, and 2 months later, 102.48. Other runners would take notice of IN optimizing up your arsenal. Nuka, who was primarily a Ratchet 1 runner, found the Ratchet 3 NG Plus run to be too bland and too similar to any percent. There was definitely potential for more, but where was he going to find it? At this point in time, the community was made up of almost entirely North Americans, with the exception of a few Europeans, and not many of them were interested in Ratchet 3. It was time to look elsewhere. This is when Nuka had a thought. What if anyone else in the world is speedrunning Ratchet? He took to YouTube and typed in Ratchet & Clank 3 speedrun and found nothing out of the ordinary. He tried again, but put those exact words through Google Translate to Japanese. What he would discover was a run 20 minutes faster than IN's time. This was the first time the Western community would lay eyes on one of the most historically significant Ratchet speedruns ever. The man, the myth, the legend. It's Silence, baby. The entire community was literally floored by the skill of this mysterious player. The amount of stuff to unpack from a single run was overwhelming. This run was actually from May of 2013, which means the Western community had been going about their day with the video hiding in plain sight for 10 months. This guy, who nobody had heard of before, had literally beaten Ratchet 3 NG Plus over an hour faster than Zem's any percent time 2 months prior. I'm sure a lot of questions are running through your mind, but now you know how the community felt when they first saw the time. So why is this run so much faster, and how was he able to save so much time? Let's go through the run, let's take the time, and see if we can figure it out together. The first thing that is an immediate improvement over IN's runs is his movement. Silence was able to crack the charge boots wide open and discover new movement techniques. He found a way to utilize Ratchet's normal moveset while traveling with the speed gained from the charge boots. I've already mentioned earlier how when you let the charge boot animation play out or shoot during the charge, the game sends you into a screeching halt. If you tap L1 during the state, which is the first person view button, Ratchet will do a small slide, and this is referred to as a neutral. The reason for the name is because you can turn this slide into multiple moves while retaining the charge boot speed, but you will lose this speed unless you leave the analog stick in the neutral position the whole time. This means you can neutral lag jump, neutral wrench swing, neutral double jump, and most importantly, neutral long jump, which allows you to clear bigger gaps. Silence also found falling neutral long jumps, which is the same concept, but the speed can be stored if you hold the stick neutral as you fall out of a charge. This wasn't the only way Silence was able to convert charge boot speed into useful movement tech. He also discovered the incredibly stylish technique known as hyperswing hovers. By hooking onto a hyperswing node with charge boot speed and swinging all the way forward to the apex, you can achieve a super fast hover if you let the analog stick go to neutral position yet again before pressing X to glide. This was used at the end of VR training and on Planet Dax to get to the warship faster. The biggest technique of all that Silence would showcase in his 4158 is the whip jump. That's right, Silence was able to find a way to do the grounded whip swing animation in mid-air and long jump off of it. You can cross extremely large gaps with this technique, and it was used multiple times in the run. Silence actually plays the entire run in lockstrafe mode rather than third person, which is probably just how he's always played. However, he does have to swap to third person when performing whip jumps, as they are frame perfect in lockstrafe. The whip jump was used on Crash Site to get from the very start of the level to an elevator on the other side, and once more on the way back to the ship, which is still how it's done in runs today. This method effectively allowed Silence to take a beeline straight to the end of the level, and then straight back, completing it all in just 35 seconds. Silence would also use the whip jump to discover one of the largest sequence breaks in the game: VR early. To the untrained eye, this doesn't look all that game-breaking. It's just a whip jump from one area to another. But if only you knew how much of the game this skips. Ratchet & Clank 3 runs on a linear progression system where you complete one planet after another until you beat the game. In a casual playthrough, the chart shown on screen is more or less the intended order to get to the end. Upon completing Annihilation Nation, the two next planets are Aquados and Tyrannosis. Once you've beaten these, you return to Starship Phoenix, and Helga has some new gadgets she wants you to test out in a virtual reality obstacle course. Upon reaching the end of the course, you get the coordinates to Planet Dax, where you move along in the game as intended. The only known way to get into VR training at the time was the intended way through Helga's teleporter, which is only active once you've beaten Tyrannosis. Silence was able to discover that the VR simulation that Helga teleports you to is actually stored in the Starship Phoenix map, way out of bounds. After Silence completes Veldin and Florana, the first two planets, he gets to the Phoenix for the first time. He gets the coordinates to Marcadia, which he needs for a visit later in the run, and immediately heads out of bounds to get to VR early. This is achieved by getting close to this silver pod in the corner, and then clipping out of bounds with the mega turrets. Once out of bounds, Silence performs a very precise slope intercept, which is a way of high jumping off of sloped surfaces you normally wouldn't be able to stand on. Afterwards, there's not much of a visual cue to get into VR training, so Silence shoots the sniper rifle a couple times to make sure he's aiming in the right spot. After completing a very precise whip jump into outer space, the level pops into existence. With this skip, Silence had completely eliminated Aquados and Tyrannosis from the run. The time save is difficult to estimate, but we're definitely talking minutes, probably over 5. Following VR early, Silence does most of the planets in a completely different order. Dax, normally the 7th planet casually, is now done 3rd, right after VR. To demonstrate how different this route is, allow me to put it up for comparison. Yeah. Definitely a stark contrast. I've spent most of my time discussing the left-hand side of the chart, but a keen-eyed viewer may notice that Iridia is missing on Silence's route. And that's because he managed to find a skip for that too. Iridia's only purpose in the game is to allow you to obtain the Warp Pad, which is a gadget that allows you to solve specific puzzles. This is used exclusively on Quark's hideout, so if there was a way to get to the end without needing the gadget, you could skip Iridia entirely. Now let's take a look at how Silence did it.
Catch their trail.
A summoner has disconnected. Welcome to Summoner's Rift. A summoner has
This first neutral long jump is actually still done in runs today, since it's the quickest way to get out of bounds. The sloped terrain near the back end of Quark's hut is extremely awkward to scale, and Silence opts to use the Tira guys to stabilize, which was pretty unique for the time. After this, he enters the end of the level from behind, and hotfoots it back to the ship. On top of skipping planets, Silence would find many ways of skipping large chunks of the ones you do play. He found a skip at the start of Marcadia by charging off this egg-looking thing to get to the ship on the other side, and immediately begin the combat missions. Also on Marcadia, Silence would find Refractor Skip. The Refractor is an item you mainly use on Obani Gemini to redirect the laser around the map to lower a green force field. Silence found a clever clip through the force field using the Tirageis, which skipped grabbing the Refractor altogether. He also found this barrier skip in the Holostar Clank section, which skips saving the Gadgetbots. A quick 15 seconds. Silence would discover some pretty big turret clips as well. One here on Obani Draco skips you from the midpoint in the level to the end by charging through the air. Another one here at the end of Velden skips the entire dogfight and gets you to the ship with a directional changing neutral long jump over the final gap. And another one on the Ratchet section of Holostar, where you clip immediately after you spawn into the Titanium Bolt Path, which has a teleporter to your ship atop a maggot strip. The final Silence discovery I want to cover for now might not be the most game-breaking or time-saving, but is one of the most creative skips he's come up with. This one really showcases his big brain. This is Planet Koros, the penultimate level of the game. Your starting position is down here, and you see that big turret way up there? That's where the end of the level is. The intended route has you walking your way around until you get to the interior of the turret, but we all know that Silence is going to do something crazy. Yup, 4 SIs off of a wall that doesn't even look close to being a surface you can do it on. He literally high jumps around the out of bounds part of the wall, slides back into the wall, and gets the crouching animation for a split second 4 times back to back. This definitely took some out of the box thinking, but at this point it should be very clear what kind of genius we're dealing with. Considering that he already found several insane skips at this point, this one is just the cherry on top. The inclusion of the new skips and movement tech made the run significantly harder, turning it from any percent with the charge boots into a completely different beast. Even today, Ouya NG Plus is still considered by the majority to be the most brutal category to compete in across the entire Ratchet series. When the community discovered Silence's run, they also stumbled upon a couple of his other videos. Silence was, and is still, known to make some of the greatest glitch compilations for Ouya, once again showcasing his great mind. A handful of these were uploaded throughout 2013, all the way up into early 2014, right when the community discovered him. While the community was in awe of his skill, they weren't sure whether his 4158 was a single segment run or not, as it was uploaded in multiple parts. There was a language barrier, so it was hard to tell. Since the super serious and professional Google Docs leaderboards in 2014 only tracked single segment runs, they weren't sure whether it should be included. Silence would actually reply to the YouTube comments and confirm the speculation that his 4158 was indeed a segmented run. While this may have been disappointing for some, Silence was far from being done. All of the glitch videos he'd been uploading throughout 2013 and early 2014 held a subtle message that he was still playing, still finding glitches, and still honing his skills to become the best. This time, Silence was ready for round 2. He was going to blow the world's mind once again, and he was going to do it single segment. Silence's first single segment run would result in a 42-23, a time only 25 seconds slower than his segmented run. But Silence didn't just want to get close, he wanted to beat it. Silence had broken through the 40-minute barrier with 39:54, but the train wasn't stopping. .37:46 was and still is Silence's final time in Up Your Arsenal. June 6th, 2014 would be the last time Silence would lower this coveted record. The only notable improvements that Silence incorporated over the months was a faster VR early that skipped the lengthy SIs, better routes on Quark's Hideout and Metropolis, swapping to the PS2 version, which was a bit faster at the time, and skipping the Tira guys on Annihilation Nation. The Tira guys was used in 3 places in the run, and Silence found a way to obsolete them all. Another huge chunk of his time save was from better movement. Silence was now noticeably better at retaining top speed, doing the tricks he already knew with less setup, and innovating new movement strings to get him through the game quicker. Silence had single-handedly turned a beloved childhood classic into one of the most high-octane speed games on the PlayStation 2. The skill floor to learn even the most basic movements in the game is incredibly high. It must have taken Silence hours to master the movement tricks and to become consistent at it all. For anyone else to get on his level, it came with the intimidating task of extracting the overload of information his runs contained. Our old moose friend, IN, seemed up for the task. Impressively enough, IN would be the first Western player that was able to learn the movement, learn the tricks, and follow Silence's route pretty closely. He would top out with a 41:04 when Silence had set a 39:13 just a day prior. A pretty good time, but a bit less than 2 minutes off. It's possible IN could have competed with Silence had he kept going, but chose to focus on other categories instead. Zem would return to Ouya in October of 2014, but had a lot of catching up to do in terms of knowledge. IN and Rack 1 runner Slaughter would catch them up to date with Silence and his enormous change of the game's meta. Zem would learn Ratchet 3 New Game Plus from scratch and would embark on a 7-month-long grind to take down Silence, which is a testament to how ahead of his time he really was. While you may know Zem for being the big personality that he is today, these were some of his earliest streams, with his viewer count being between 5 and 20. But as he got better, he would draw more attention, and Silence would be toppled once and for all with a 37:20 on April 2nd, 2015. 2015 was also the year I got into the game, and when I got a good grasp of the movement, I decided to document the various groundwork Silence had laid out in form of the Ratchet and Clank 3 movement guide. This taught new players how to perform the techniques that Silence had discovered years prior. The video is fairly outdated, so it remains unlisted, but was the go-to tool for the time. Zem would go on to hold the record for a full 6.5 years, which is a story in and of itself. It was actually beaten very recently, in fact, by Tarna, a Polish runner who's been on Zem's tail along with Captain Wiffle for years at this point. This makes the Ouya NG Plus World Record Holder Club very special and very small, only reserved for the most dedicated runners, and right now it sits at only 4 people, with this guy right here being the main reason so many people run this game today. While Zem and others definitely helped spread the word about Up Your Arsenal speedrunning, the game would not sell itself if it wasn't for Silence. He is the one who created the movement system we know and love today, and he's the one that found half of the tricks in the game that are still seeing use. Silence's influence was so monumental it would spawn immense optimization for Ratchet 2 as well. The movement system is very similar in Rack 2, and tricks like whip jumping with the wrench became stable tech that is used to this day. After Silence stopped doing runs in mid-2014, he would still continue to upload glitch compilation videos for Ratchet 3, with the occasional Deadlocked video as well. 2018 would be the last time we would hear from Silence. He has not uploaded a video in 3.5 years. Silence is a bit of a mysterious character. He emerged from the shadows, posted groundbreaking videos, and vanished completely. Few things are known about this guy since there is a language barrier after all, but what we do know is that he was intelligent, innovative, and incredibly skilled. Some community members speculate that Silence couldn't have been doing it all by himself, and that there was a small Japanese community that were working things out together. Some speculate that Silence was incredibly skilled at Ouya multiplayer, which has a hardcore fan base filled with players who all have incredibly good movement. Lag jumping was actually discovered on multiplayer, but most of the other tech used in speedruns isn't possible here because you're missing Clank on your back. Japan also never had Ouya multiplayer available to play for the public, which means that Silence couldn't have been playing it. It's possible he was playing it with a ton of friends offline, but I'd say that's a stretch. What's more plausible is that Silence was an avid glitch hunter and was inspired by older glitch videos uploaded in the early days of YouTube. This theory is by far and large the most conceivable and is backed up by this YouTube comment replying to old school glitch hunter Chidori, where it states that he used to watch his glitch hunting videos all the way back in 2008. Silence never joined the community Skype group or the Discord when that was being created, so we have very little information to go off of. While we may not know a lot about the person behind these findings, we know a lot about what they did to the game. What presumably started as curiosity for an old game led to one man laying the groundwork for an incredible speedrun. While the world record is now 10 minutes faster, you gotta pay respect when it's due. It's safe to say that we wouldn't have a run this optimized and difficult if it wasn't for Silence. Whether or not he may show up again one day, the community is eternally grateful for everything he did. Thanks for watching, and special thanks to my patrons shown on screen. If you wish to support the channel, you can chip in a couple bucks a month to get your name shown on screen in the next video. As always, take care, and have a good one.
The hunter and the shall I take?
An ally has been slain.
Made of.
Your inhibitor has been destroyed.
Scent of prey. Walk the killer's path. Comfort breeds weakness.
Orxon, one of Ratchet & Clank's most infamous planets. The signature toxic waste level design, its multiple choice pathways, and sheer difficulty make it distinct from other planets. Within Orxon lies a mystery, an unsolved puzzle that Ratchet & Clank speedrunners and glitch hunters have been trying to solve for over 7 years, ever since it was first theorized. Today, we're going to dive into this game's most elusive challenge, an enigma that remains unsolved to this day. With everything the community has managed to find so far, only a single piece of the puzzle remains unsolved. This is the story of beating Orxon as Clank, better known as Pokeskip. To better understand how difficult of a puzzle this is to solve, let's take a look at the bigger picture. In Ratchet & Clank, you progress through the game by collecting infobots. These little robots will give you the coordinates to the next planet, while simultaneously showing you a small preview of what the planet has to offer in a short cutscene. Infobots are usually obtained by bribing characters, reaching the end of the planet, or beating bosses. The mid-game in Ratchet & Clank is very confusing in regards to the planet order, and it all starts with Battalia. There are two infobots you can collect on this planet, one from the main path, and the other after completing a grind boot section. The main path will give you the coordinates to the planet that's the focus of this video, Orxon, while the grind boot section will end with the gas bar infobot. If we head to Orxon first, a cutscene clearly displays that the air on the planet is so polluted that it's impossible for Ratchet to breathe unaided, which means that Clank has to venture out on his own. In context of the speedrun, you've been playing as only Ratchet up until this point. As Clank, we're now stripped of Ratchet's acrobatic moveset and weaponry. With fewer options at our disposal, enemies become harder, puzzles longer, and as a result, this Clank section can take upwards of 6 minutes, even for a speedrunner with experience. If you play this game casually, you'll probably remember the notorious length this planet beholds. The end of the Clank section will give you the infobot to Pokitaru, another new planet. If we head straight for Pokitaru and escort the resort's owner, aka the guy, to his destination, we're met with a jet fighter we can't operate without the pilot's helmet. The helmet is located on Gaspar, and finding it is the only objective on the planet. As a result, it's wise to go to Gaspar first to grab the pilot's helmet after it works on, and then go to Pokitaru so you won't have to backtrack. Now with the pilot's helmet in our possession, we can go back to Pokitaru to pilot the fighter jet. In exchange for taking out the tankers that are dumping waste into the waters of the resort, the guy gives us the O2 mask, which is used by Ratchet on a return visit to Orxon. The O2 mask allows him to move around freely on the planet without inhaling the polluted air, and opens up the rest of the level thanks to the better movement options. This brings us to one of the core points in solving this puzzle, and that is how you're supposed to beat Orxon 2. The infobot you're supposed to collect as Ratchet on Orxon 2 leads to Hoven, where the game takes a more linear structure towards the end game. However, this infobot is unlike most of the previous ones in that it's not just simply sitting at the end of the level, waiting for you to collect it. The infobot on Orxon 2 is supposed to be chased through 7 different locations on the map, where it can then be collected on the 7th and final location. Using some speedrun tricks, we can reach all of these locations fairly quickly, and luckily for us, the infobot does not move back to a previous location unless you die while chasing it around. The first infobot location seems to be in plain sight, tricking the player with a false sense of accomplishment. Once you get within a radius of the infobot, it moves on to its next location. The second location is the most out of the way, all the way up on an isolated platform. The last 5 locations are fairly straightforward to reach, with the fastest route to each one roughly following the game's intended path. The third location is straight across the second, the fourth is here, not far from the third, the fifth is just across,
Shut down. Enemy killing
the sixth is at the bottom of the Magnabood wall, and the 7th and final one lies atop the Magnabood wall, where you can then move on with your quest. In 2013, speedrunners slowly but surely started theorizing a major skip for the New Game Plus speedrun, Poke-Skip. While the name implies the skip of the planet Pokitaru, you would skip much more than that. To figure out how much time it takes for one to go through all the steps to get to Hoven, we have to start all the way back on Blarg Station. On Blarg, you would spend about 2 minutes and 2,000 bolts to buy the grind boots. These grind boots would then be used for exactly one thing in the entire run, and that is to obtain the Gaspar infobot on planet Battalia. The grind boot section would be about 1.5 minutes. You'd then have to do Gaspar in order to get the pilot's helmet, which would take about 1 minute. Orxon 1's Clank section can be shortened from 6 minutes to 4 with the help of some clips. Pokitaru is a pretty lengthy level itself, and is typically upwards of 4.5 minutes. Orxon 2 with all its infobot chasing around the level would be about 1 minute and 40 seconds. All of this extra time comes in at a total of a bit less than 15 minutes. 15 minutes is an outrageous amount of time for a speedrun this short, so an idea was proposed. Since the Hoven infobot is loaded and can be obtained during any visit of Orxon, why don't we try collecting it as Clank? If possible, this would skip the grind boots on Blard, the grind rail section on Battalia, and all of Gaspar, Pokitaru, and Orxon 2. This question then turned into one of the toughest challenges the community has ever been faced with, finding a way to get the Hovet infobot on Orxon during the very first visit of the planet. As Clank, a character with a single slow and clunky attack, a very short jump height, and extremely limited maneuverability. To get to all 7 locations, the community had to dig deep. This was going to be hard. In order to reach the infobot locations as Clank, a lot of creative thinking had to come into effect, knowing the ins and outs of the game's mechanics, the terrain and its collision, and perhaps if enemies could be of use. In order to kickstart the search for Pokeskip, we have to start from the beginning, and the opening jump is the first glaring issue. The developers clearly tried to deter the player from going this direction on Orxon as Clank, by making the platform just out of reach. One of the 2013 runners of Ratchet & Clank New Game Plus, Ticeman, was able to find a skip for the Orxon Clank section, saving several minutes in the speedrun. By being on a New Game Plus file of the game, you can unlock the Goodies menu. Inside the Goodies menu, you can find in-level movies. This is a way to view any in-game cutscene of the planet you're on. A side effect of in-level movies is that they reset Clank's state to a grounded idle state when played. If you jump over the set of pipes next to the ship and play an in-level movie, the game will warp Clank down to the ground inside of the pipes. You can then punch in a certain spot, and you'll get a big proxy jump conveniently right up to the Pokitaru infobot. The discovery of proxies in Ratchet & Clank would catch the interest among speedrunners, and soon enough, we would start to see proxies be helpful in the quest for Pokeskip. Leaping into the following year of 2014, runner Cypress would upload a video on the first day of the year, titled Ratchet & Clank Orxon Clank Escape. The video showcases that once you're up at the infobot area, you can jump along the rail where the Pokitaru infobot was, glide, and barely get a ledge grab onto the first platform. Cypress keeps the footage running for about another minute to show how far you can make it as Clank. The glide down to the main section is pretty easy. You can make it across the 2 sinking platforms just fine as well, but once